Ladies and gentlemen, welcome you all to India HR Live, where change agents transform the world of HR. And today we have a fantastic panel joined with us from Wipro HR team, so Wipro India HR team, to share with us their amazing journey of hypo employees development, retention, and engagement. So stay tuned, and if you are out there watching India HR Live, pull up the hashtag India HR Live on Twitter, and let us know what you think if you are watching the show, and if you have any questions, please chime in there and shoot your questions to our guest. So without further ado, let's meet our panelists for the day, Mr. Vishal Shah and Meenal Gupta. Vishal and Meenal, welcome to Welcome to India HR Live.
Thank you so much.
Thank
you. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you, Meenal. Well, thank you so much for you guys for being there with us today. It's a late night in India. And Vishal, you have been here before, so welcome back to India HR Live. And Meenal, you are on first time at India HR Live, so a very warm welcome to you.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to it.
Great. So why don't you guys go ahead
I think
and
it's going to be fun.
It is indeed, believe me. So why don't you guys go ahead and let our audience know what you guys do at Wipro. I know you guys represent Wipro HR team, but then what you guys do specifically at India at Wipro team. Vishal, why don't you kick off?
Sure. So I've been in Wipro for almost 5 years now. And the portfolio that I currently handle is on leadership development. Our group as such is called Leadership and People Sciences. So really, it's the entire gamut of leadership development. That's what I really look after, basically, in Wipro. Yeah. So that's a little bit about.
I know. I saw your Twitter handle the name has changed from Wipro CHRD to People Science, right?
Leadership and People Science.
Correct. So that's a great journey right there. So Meenal, how about you? What's your role at Wipro?
So at the moment, I handle talent assessments for senior level managers and senior leadership talent in the company. We use assessments for a variety of purposes, including role movements and promotions. So I handle that, and I also handle the organization capability building team, which primarily works on employee engagement and career pathing initiatives. So that's what I do.
Yes. Well, that's great to know, because you know what, today we are talking more about talent assessment and identifying this HiPos, right? So it is an honor to have you guys here joining with us to let us know your initiative and your challenges that you had in the beginning and how to tackle all those challenges. So let's unfold all those stories, but before we get to that, let's give our audience a little bit of content and context on the HiPos. We always talk about, we need high performers. That's where the agenda before, long time ago. But now we are thinking about how can we hire for potential. Potential is the most important thing that organizations are looking forward to from their talent. So why don't you break it down, Vishal? What's the difference between top performers and hypo employees? How do you define this hypo employees?
Sure. So I think high performers are important at all levels to organizations. They have always been. The reason why the term high potential has come up is because apart from performance, we look at some other factors which make somebody successful over a period of time and consistently. So really that's where the term high potential has come up, and that's what we really look for as far as talent is concerned. The other thing is that as environment changes, as the pace of change becomes faster, it's the high potentials who are likely to take the organization into the future. Yeah, so that's really the difference between high performers and high potentials.
Right. So now, the high potential programs are there out in Wipro, but from the organization side, what are you doing when it comes to identifying and picking out those employees who you consider as hypo employees? Meenal, would you like to take it over?
Sure. So I think the first criteria is looking at those folks who have consistently shown high performance in their current and previous roles. So one does consider that pool and further refines that pool to select the high potential employees. Once the performance bit is established, then one looks for certain key things. One is the kind of roles, the diversity and the complexity of roles that the individual has handled. So one gets an idea of the width and the depth of experience the person has. Then one looks at, one looks at, let's say, what is the achievement orientation of that person, and a few other characteristics. Now, one looks at performance ratings, but one also looks for certain, we also have certain assessment methods to identify these high potentials.
So would you mind taking us through the assessment methods?
So one of the key assessment methods we have is a 360-degree feedback process in the company, which is done for all the leaders, and it is done on an annual basis. I mentioned the performance management system earlier. We look for manager recommendations, and once the manager recommendations are there and certain key questions on potential are answered by the manager, then we further refine our search by asking certain questions during our annual talent review and planning exercise. And once those questions are answered, the list of high potentials is ready.
Oh, all right, that's great. So, how do you actually go about communicating this hypo employees, to them and letting them know that they are in the list of hypo, which is a big deal, right? Because you are segregating one particular employees and then letting them know that you are high potential employees, but at the same time we have some low performers as well. So how do you kind of differentiate the expectations level between these two groups? Vishal, would you like to?
Sure. So this is in some sense a double-edged sword, as you just pointed out. Because you are identifying one group at the same time. It also means that another group comes into existence. The word hypo today has strong connotations. Yeah. So at least in our case, we like to stay away from the word hypo. Yeah.
So is there a different word for that?
So so we use a word like, let's say, the Wipro Talent Academy or something like that. Really, it's like that.
Okay.
But really, yeah. So it's more neutral as such, because the term itself has got a lot of connotations. But really, it's about talent in some sense, right? So that's what we do. So and in terms of communication, so definitely we would communicate that you are people whom we find to have strong competencies. You seem to be able to kind of look at the next set of roles as part of your career path, but the responsibility of this lies on you. So while the organization provides a lot of support, really the responsibility of taking that development and other initiatives, the candidate has to run with it. So that's the communication to the participants and to the stakeholders involved, right? So the stakeholders may involve the supervisors of the participants, for example. Yeah, so these are the groups whom we would communicate to about the HiPo program, but may not be to the entire organization or the larger masses.
All right, so then, take me to, is high performance a prerequisite for being identified as HiPos? So what is that prerequisite in order to become identified as HiPos in your organization?
So Minal, you want to take that?
Sure. So we do start with the pool of high performers. That's the initial entry criteria. But all high performers are not high potentials. So to refine that list further, some of the key things that we look for, one is quite simply put the drive to do more, the drive to achieve more in one's career. So that's the first thing. The other thing we look for is how committed the individual is to the organization, and a track record kind of shows us that. Then we also look at certain key interpersonal skills and skills that show leadership presence in the organization. And finally, I think one looks for what we call learning agility, and that becomes a key criteria for predicting future success as a leader. So these 3-4 things combined tell us that who amongst the high performers are our high potential leaders for future roles in the company.
That is indeed a great criteria and strategy to kind of identify and then identify the HiPos. So let's talk a little bit more about the program as such. Who owns this HiPo initiative in your organization, and who all are involved in that program?
So there would be multiple stakeholders involved. There would be a function like mine, which is leadership development. The central HR function would be involved. Business units, because the HiPos as such come from there. So it's really the governance mechanism would involve all these three parties and stakeholders.
Correct. Well, in fact, I'm really glad that Meenal has said that all high performers are not what high potential implies, and we got that question already from Sarang on Twitter. These all high potentials are always high performers, and they are asking. So I'm glad you already answered that question. So right now at this point we are talking about the program. So should you communicate to the HiPos, but at the same time, what would you what kind of a support or the language that you would want to communicate to the HiPos, and how do you want these stakeholders involved in that communication? Because Vishal, you said some of the stakeholders, right? So, and especially manager has a great role. I'm assuming manager has a great role in that. So what would you like, what kind of a support would you like to get from those stakeholders in order to communicate that to HiPos?
So one of our realizations is that the supervisor of an identified high potential participant plays a strong role in the entire process, in terms of engaging, in terms of the entire communication, and in terms of ensuring that whatever support the organization has provided, some of these things are taken advantage of. So in terms of communication, it's really about talking about the future, talking about some of the different roles that these participants could likely play. The communication would involve elements of the different elements of the hyper program itself, whether in terms of support, development, exposure, visibility, etc. So really, the communication would involve all of this.
Right, right. So, well, in that case, how do you manage? We talked about the communication. So, how do you manage the evaluation of this hypo? In what kind of involvement all the stakeholders would be having when it comes to not only just identifying them, but then in order to kind of following that path and retaining them and even engaging them within the organization. Meenal, I know you handle employee engagement at your organization, so would you like to answer that question?
Sure. So what we found is that the success of any such program is highly dependent on what the employee experiences in the form of organizational commitment, and that organizational commitment can be shown only by regular engagement, regular support provided to these high potential employees. So that's where these identified set of program managers, I think that's where they come in play. So the central function as well as the leadership
Mm-hmm.
function, they play a key role in in tracking the developments in the careers of all these employees, and in some way actually guiding these developments, making sure that all of them receive consistent feedback on how they are doing and what lies ahead, what kind of career path can they hope for, what is it that the organization is expecting in terms of output, making sure that all of this is put into a personalized development plan, and that development plan then gets tracked on a regular basis. Of course, we have a lot of development, initiatives identified, but making sure that they receive consistent feedback and we engage regularly with them. We have a regular dialogue with them. That is what sustains the engagement levels.
So, you kind of talked about that sustained engagement level, and we have that question already on our Twitter stream. And Raghunandan, SV Raghunandan, he's asking, how do you ensure that underperformers are transformed into hypo employees? So at this point, what we have a group of employees, such a prestigious group, right? The hypo or high potential employees who would consider as the future leaders of the organization. But then how do you ensure that diversity factor within that hypo group, wherein you are bringing new blood every time and then making sure all of your employees have got that opportunity to work towards achieving that prestigious role in the future?
So, when you're managing the high potential pool, there is a goal for people who are in that high potential program. As and when they achieve their goal,
Mm-hmm.
let's say the goal is to move to a specific role. As and when they achieve their goal, there will be space created for new entrants into the pool. So, some people will move out because they have achieved the goal for which they were put into the high potential program. That creates a space and fresh set of people comes in. And at certain points in the time, at certain points in the program, we would also have a formal assessment of the potential of the person, the engagement levels of that person. Some people may want to drop out of the program voluntarily. For some people, the assessment may show that they are no longer in the potential pool, and that also creates space for more people to come in. Uh, The other thing is that it's a key expectation from these high potential employees that they will create more high potential employees in the company. So they will be talent builders. So in that sense,
Okay.
a continuous supply of high potentials will be created in the organization.
All right. So you talked about, some of the people who are dropping out of these programs. So can you let us know what's the reason that they're choosing to drop out from the program and why that is happening, and how do you kind of um, fix that issue?
Vishal, would you like to take that question?
Yeah, sure. Okay. So the dropout could be due to many reasons. The first reason, of course, is that, uh, like in any system, over a period of time, out of, let's say, the entire batch of people whom we are working with, some of them may find that this is not according to what they thought of in terms of their career paths, or in terms of the routes they want to take, or even in terms of their ability to cope. So like in any system, there would always be a small percentage who would then rather say that, look, this is not really what I want, or we would find that they are not necessarily able to kind of keep pace with it. So really, they are both kinds, basically. Either there would be people who themselves would, in some sense, choose to kind of drop out, or there would be people who would say that it would be better if, so in any case, as Minil said, so it's better if
Correct.
somebody else is kind of given the chance. Yeah, so that's the other type. So really, it's a combination of both of these.
Correct. Well, in that case, some of the employees might not be, as you said, some of the employees might be realizing that this is not what I have expected, or
Yeah.
this is going to be too much pressure for me, so much of expectation, a huge expectation, which I might not be able to commit to that. So how do you tackle that issue with sort of mentoring and coaching? And in fact, we have a question from Vijay Bankar. He is asking, does coaching and mentoring facilitate the process of developing HiPos? So would you mind sharing some of the examples at your organization?
So, so the entire development plan. So it's not just that it stops after some kind of an identification process. Once we have a group, we work with them continuously. Working with them would involve different elements. It would involve formal inputs. It would involve exposure to different opportunities. It would involve informal inputs. We form communities of hypos in the organization, so in some sense they also tend to support each other through these communities. Mentoring and coaching is definitely a part of this entire process, because it plays a key role in this. And so, in some sense, as it also falls on us that the people whom we are giving so much attention to also have experienced some measure of success, right? And so because of that, we do tend to, we provide mentoring, coaching, and any kind of support that the person needs. Yeah. So obviously it is definitely a part of this entire exercise, and it's also long term. So it's over a period of time. It's not just that it finishes in some months or on a short period of time.
All right. So let's talk about the benefits a little bit. What are some benefits that you provide to hypo employees? I'm sure you talked about mentoring and coaching, and apart from that, how do you actually support these hypo employees outside of this, high potential or that privileged expected role? But here are some of the benefits that you are providing in order to engage them. Do you happen to have? Yeah.
So some of the common ways in which you nurture the high potentials, and that's really the benefits that they get, one is visibility and access to senior leaders. So, you would typically find that they will be mentored by senior folks. They would be included in meetings where important decisions are being taken. And that's one way of, just grooming them for leadership roles, but also, offering them that opportunity to, to have their point heard and make a difference in the decision-making process. So that's the first thing. The second is that any sort of, let's say, high dollar training or special assignments, these would be first offered to the high potentials because they are the ones who can show maximum impact with these benefits. The other thing would be that newer roles, more complex roles, which help an individual develop her skill further. Uh, any role that involves greater responsibility, those roles will be offered first to the high potential employees. So, they get a benefit of developing their skills, developing a wholesome experience profile, and getting the exposure to the right sort of things. And I think the final thing is that giving them more freedom and greater flexibility to make decisions. I think that's one, so greater autonomy, that's one key benefit which is offered to the high potentials.
Right, and we have an interesting question that has come up on our Twitter stream, and that is from Shamik Vora, and he is asking, is anyone with a good IQ, EQ, and SQ by default not hyper? So, who wants to answer that question?
What? Yeah. Go ahead, Mel.
Okay, so I actually don't believe in these labels of IQ, EQ, and SQ. We talked about some of the criteria that we use for identifying the high potential employees, and I think just to reiterate those, high performance, consistently high performing individual with drive to succeed, with great engagement levels with the company, and the right sort of experience to back it up. I think those are some of the things that make somebody a high potential.
Vishal, would you like to add any quotes?
So, I could add to this. In Pro for today, we define two categories of business. Yeah? The first category is running the business, and second category is growing the business. So this is the business of the future. Now, really, in some sense, we obviously need our people to definitely run the business, right? Which is the regular stuff. As far as grow the business, and this is where HiPos play a critical role, and that's really, in some sense, the way we look at the role of the HiPos. And there, then, it's really about, so for example, Minal mentioned learning agility. So these are some of the factors that actually play a role, because the person must be able to learn things quickly, be able to handle ambiguous situations, etc.
So learnability is a huge part when it comes to identifying HiPos, right? So, and in fact, we have a question on that. That is from S.V. Raghunandan, and he's asking about the training. Do you have a training program from? Do you have a cross training from the HiPo employees in developing lesser potential employees and creating a pool? So I guess Meenal has already answered to that question, saying HiPo employees are talent builders within your organization, right? But Meenal, if you can elaborate at your organization, how do you actually go about making that an agenda and having a structured program that you are training your HiPo employees in bringing more HiPo employees to that pool?
Yeah, so I earlier mentioned a formal assessment method of 360-degree feedback, which is an annual process. And one of the qualities that we look for in that 360-degree feedback process is nurturing teams, where a key expectation from the senior leaders is to build teams under them, build teams which may not be even formally reporting to them. So creating these high potentials in the organization who are then able to take on more complex roles is something that is expected of every senior leader in the organization. They get formally evaluated on that, and during the leadership development programs, a great emphasis is laid on what is it that they are investing in terms of talent building in the company, and specialist roles, people manager roles, all of them are formally tasked in their roles and objectives as well to develop teams in their respective areas. And I think we have good role models to show in the company. So, for example, our topmost leadership, the chairman as well as the CEO, they spend a large part of their time in personally overseeing how the topmost talent in the organization is being groomed. So that kind of sets an example for the other leaders also to give it the time it takes to develop leaders under them, and that behavior then cascades down to all the leaders in the organization.
That's interesting. And the next question that's on our Twitter stream, well, I really wanted to stick to that way of covering that retention part. And an interesting question that has come up on our Twitter stream is from Sarang Brahmi, and he is asking, are HiPos always earn better compensation? So take us through that, break it down about that salary part, which is always a hidden factor when it comes to organizations or even people who are representing the organization. They don't really want to disclose that compensation factor. But if you would like to, or if you don't mind, do you think that this HiPo, or at your organization, HiPos are always earning better compensation?
So this is how I would put it. It's not really so much about HiPos earning better compensation. It's really, if you listen to kind of all the elements that we spoke about, it's easy to then see that hence HiPos end up with faster growth, yeah, because of all these inputs. And it's that faster growth which then in some sense over a period of time definitely leads to higher compensation. So it's not that we identify somebody as a HiPo and immediately the pay increases. And the expectation is set very clear in those terms. It's just that the kind of inputs, support, development that the person may get then leads to, is likely to lead to higher growth path, which definitely over a period of time obviously leads to higher compensation.
All right. So you diplomatically answered that question, and thank you for that. So, and another question that has come up on our Twitter stream is, again, a while ago, Meenal has already covered that when it comes to communicating to people who are not in that HiPo list. But we already talked about people dropping out of that list voluntarily. Now, how about if there is a rejection that happens? And this question is from Shivangi Tyagi. She's asking, how would you communicate to non-HiPos if they are rejected in the identification process, and they would also be top talent for your organization, but they can get demotivated due to this rejection. So how do you go about tackling that sensitive issue of demotivation at your organization?
So I think all of us expect and realize that differentiation today is a part of life, right? I mean,
Correct.
right from school we know that there are people who come first and there are people who don't, right? So I don't think that concept is alien to any of us. We are used
Not
to
at
that,
all.
and I don't think there is any rejection happening.
Uh-huh.
HiPo is an aspirational program, right? So
Mhm.
uh, the people who would kind of form the group which, let's say, does not become a part of HiPo, there would be regular engagement processes, regular communication processes, which would anyway be happening, right, as part of organizational processes. It's not that, because even research shows that in some sense the real HiPos are less than 10% in an organization. Now, it doesn't
Mhm.
mean that the rest of the 90% of the organization is not needed, right? So obviously there's a lot that happens to keep the rest of the population engaged.
Correct. Well, in fact, while hearing that, I still remember that I read a study from, I guess it is Quantum Workforce, and they did a study on the succession planning, and they say only 34% of the organizations can effectively identify future leaders, and only 1% of executives believe their succession plans are excellent. And 66% of executives rate their succession plans as fair or worse. So, Vishal, you and Meenal being the leader of the organization, how would you want the support from the management team or from the C-suite in order to get a buy-in for this particular initiative so they can be great advocate at your organization, or probably any other organization for that matter outside of your organization, and who are listening to this show who wanted to implement this particular initiative? We definitely wanted to get the buy-in from our leaders in order to successfully launch this program, right? So what do you recommend? What kind of a support would you want to get from your leaders, from the C-suite?
So I think Minal mentioned this earlier. In some sense, we have been fortunate. We've always got the support of the C-suite, including
Correct.
the chairman.
Mm-hmm.
He himself is extensively involved in talent mentoring and promotion and other such discussions. So that as such means that we don't really face the issue of a lack of sponsorship in the organization. And because
Mm-hmm.
of this keen involvement, it also makes sure that the effort that we put in, it doesn't go to waste. Yes, I do agree that it's not an easy task to identify future leaders. One of the metrics that is a fairly well-known metric is that Wipro is possibly an organization that has given the highest number of CEOs to the industry. So that in
Mm-hmm.
some sense speaks of the kind of success that our talent identification and high potential program has had. That then ensures that we kind of continue to get further sponsorship from the C-suite. Vinal, you want to add something?
So, at a more tactical level, I would say that I mentioned earlier that for high potential employees, I think what matters a lot is how can they see the organization commitment in action. And one of the ways in which the C-suite can show their commitment is ensuring that once all the development inputs are given from the organization and the individual is also showing increased levels of performance in the company, then the actual movement to the next level of role or the level after that, that actual movement happens because that's where, to use a cliche, that is where the rubber meets the road. And that's where the C-suite
Mm-hmm.
sponsorship becomes extremely critical. And I think that's one key thing one would look for.
All right. Now, Vishal, you talked a little bit about the metrics and measurement at your organization. So, how do you actually go about, or what are some metrics and measurement that you would suggest to our audience when it comes to measuring the success of a HiPo initiative?
one basic metric is obviously levels of the hypos itself, right? Because that's an important goal of the program. The next metric is the ability to fill in key positions and the presence of a leadership bench in the organization, especially when opportunities arise. So that's a second way to look at it, which is for specific positions. The third way to look at it is to look at the rise of hypos and the movements that they experience in their own career paths. So I would say these are three metrics definitely that talk about the success of a hypo program.
Alright, in fact, there is a question that has come up on our Twitter stream, and that is from AJ Todd Streaming. Okay, so he is asking, is there any research and data on hypo failure rate at your organization? So we have done tons and tons of time and money and effort and implementing and identifying hypo initiatives. I mean, implementing hypo initiatives and identifying hypo employees. And how about how do you actually measure the failure rate? And if so, how do you actually fix that?
There are obviously there are instances where we would experience failure. For example, it is very important that we firstly identify the right people who would then go through these. That's a very critical factor, and we found that if that is not taken seriously, then that kind of affects the success of this entire initiative quite a bit. So identification plays a key role. Minal also mentioned earlier that the pool of hypos is regenerated continuously. So there is always a small population of the hypo group that will drop out of the program for various reasons. So that is one measure of how much of a success the program has been and what percentage of hypos have been able to kind of contribute richly and successfully to the organization for a long period of time. So really these are two that I can think of. Minal, would you want to add to this?
No, I think you've covered all the metrics.
Okay, sure.
All right. So throughout your conversation, I've noticed that we were giving most focus on the the competency and the potential of the employees, and we haven't even touched one important factor, which is the culture, which I really wanted to know more about. So would you consider that factor while evaluating or even identifying the hypo employees? Because culture plays a great role, right? And we would want somebody who stick to the organization goals, and then we would want somebody who gets it, right? So have you ever, throughout your evaluation program, is there a factor that that culture fit comes in the evaluation process, or evaluating the performance or during the performance management time, or sometime would you be considering the culture factor in order to identifying the hypos?
Sure. Minal, you want to take that?
Okay, so in many ways, the values that we have stated for the organization, they become the basis of the organization culture. And a key expectation from all employees, and more so from high potentials, is that they become the role models for these values, for the company values. So again, just going back to the 360-degree feedback process we talked about, that feedback process, apart from skills, it also seeks feedback on how well the leader practices the organization values. And that is a clear indication for us whether there is a value-based fit between the individual and the organization or not. They can come from different cultures. They may even want to break some cultural norms. But as long as the basic values match, we find that there is a case for high potential identification there.
Mm-hmm. All right. So going back to the thoughts and the discussions that we covered, one interesting concept that I forgot to ask you, and which is the time period or the duration of this HiPo program. Um, what kind of a time frame is required for a HiPo program to give results?
So it's important to understand that this is a long-term initiative, it's a long-term engagement to really look at potential over a short period of time. One needs to look at potential over time, over experiences, over roles, and that's a philosophy that we also have. So, in formal terms, we look at an initiative that is at least of a duration of 2 years. And in 2 years, of course, there are multiple elements, right? But it's also important to keep in mind that in philosophy, it's really about long-term as far as high potential is concerned.
All right. So, and next question from the audience, that is in fact, this is a quote from Sundar Ramachandran. He was saying, want to test a HiPos learning agility and make them teach. So this reminds me to, or this takes me to the question that is, the talent acquisition team, which is the people who are responsible for bringing in new blood to the organization, right? And of course, at this point, we are giving more and more focus to that culture fit factor when we are hiring somebody, not only just for competency and for potential and culture fit as well, but making sure that we are hiring for potential. And in that case, what would you recommend, or how would you suggest, or how are you helping your talent acquisition team at the front end in order to hire for potential?
Minal, you can talk about it. I'll chip in.
Okay, so I think it is one of the more difficult things to assess when you are meeting an external candidate, because you don't really have a very good, let's say, a good database of critical incidents to fall back upon while you're judging the cultural fit or not. So there are certain key questions one would ask, especially around what drives an individual, what is the what kind of aspiration does the individual have, what's the basic what kind of motivates the person. Those kind of questions are asked. And for our senior leaders, we also use certain personality tools at the time of hiring to understand the person a little better and understand, like I said, what drives the person, what is the basic value system the individual has. Then, one would ask them to fill a certain form to describe what kind of decisions they've taken in their life, what has been the motivation behind those decisions. And all these data points, when combined together, they help us understand to whatever degree it is possible that whether we are really seeing a fit between the individual and the organization culture.
For senior levels, of course, we would have formal systems of assessment, for sure, if we have to identify potential.
All right. So do you, I'm sorry to go back to one more point, do you use any sort of personality test in between in order to identify that, some of the attitudes of the employees?
So Minal's team would be using a battery of such tests, not just one, and they would be different for different levels. Maybe even if we are looking at potential in terms of a series of roles. So yes, I mean it's not just one. I mean I think yes, there's lots there.
Can you name a few of the tests that goes through this program? A few of the tests that you really use in order to identify the HiPos. Minal, would you like
Minal,
to?
you want to give away your secrets?
Oh yeah.
No, I shall keep the secret, but I would say that these are because we hire across the world. That's why these tools would be, validated, legally permissible tools that have been used over many years and are reliable predictors of leadership potential, leadership derailers as well. I think people who are active in this space would have by now understood what specific assessment tool am I talking about.
All right. Well, bear with me. I'm digging in deep because I'm so curious about your program, and that's what the reason is. So, and the next question is from Kunjal Ramachan. I'm sorry, Kunjal Kamdar, my buddy. I'm sorry for that. So, he is asking, is HiPo employee a direct result of bell curve? So, is this something to do with bell curve? And if so, how do you actually balance it out along with other employees and then HiPo employees?
I think that goes back to probably the first question, which was really the difference between high performers and high potential. And bell curve is really, in some sense, one way to look at performance. So really that's the answer that I have. And as we already said, that one would consider performance an important part of potential, because over a period of time you don't want somebody who has a high potential who does not perform. So in that sense, yes, there is a connection, but to the extent of performance.
Right. So the next question would be, what makes a HiPo program succeed? Let's put that in a nutshell, because many organizations, they do have this program, but then when it comes to making it more customized or making it more personalized, that is going to be right fit for the organization. What do you think that makes a HiPo program succeed?
One of the things I mentioned earlier is the identification process, right? That plays a very critical role. The involvement of different stakeholders, their buy-in, and their engagement, involvement in this entire initiative. The third piece is, of course, the design itself, whether it is in terms of formal inputs, whether in terms of informal inputs, or whether just in terms of experiences. I mean, today we are actually talking of a HiPo program in terms of just a series of experiences, that develops then capabilities. And of course, finally, in terms of exposure that it gives, not only just in terms of roles, etc., but also exposure to top leadership. So these are some of the elements then would probably go into the success of a high potential program.
All right, I guess I covered most of the question that has come up on our Twitter stream, and bear with me if I missed any one of them, but then I would appreciate if our audience can retweet all the questions that you see, so that makes easier for me to pull it out, and it comes upon the stream. So we talked about the identification part and about the program and what happens even after the identification, and lucky enough to get some of the tools and techniques from the HR team, and they're not revealing their the most interesting tool, which is a hidden secret, right there. So now, three challenges that I normally have seen or heard from many of the CEOs and then topmost executives out there when it comes to implementing the HiPo initiative is the components of the development plan that they have in the HiPo program in order to engage and making these HiPo employees on board about the program. So one of the challenges that they have is to get this communication to the HiPo people right in the very beginning so that they know what happens throughout the journey, what can be expected out of this program, and what are some of the expectations that organization would have from them in return for this program. So Vishal, we would really appreciate if you can give our audience some of the tips and techniques that worked for you to become number one organization that successfully launched this HiPo initiative at your organization. So what would be some of the tips and techniques that you wanted to give it out to our audience in order to wrap up the show?
So I think to begin with, the people who are chosen to participate in this, setting the right expectations is very important, because it works both ways, right? As you invest in the people, you expect a lot from the people. At the same time, it's important to state that, look, this is not a guaranteed initiative, and there's nothing specific that necessarily, unless one puts in efforts. So setting expectations is very important, right at the beginning. The next thing is continuous communication. This is not something that you can start and then kind of say check in once in a while as to how people are doing, how it's going. Really speaking, the program needs to be customized to each of the individuals, because they have been handpicked and they've been selected, and then you can't say that, look, we need a one size that fits all kind of a program. So there's a very high level of customization that kind of needs to go there, and individuals need to get their own benefits out of it. So this is the second thing. And the third thing is, while all this talk of development of potential, etc., is going on, it's important to remember that the experience itself is something that needs to keep the participants coming back. Yeah, so it's also about the experience of the initiative itself, not just what's the output of the program, right? So there are elements in the program which make the program very aspirational and desirable, or else it becomes a regular training program, for example.
Right. Well, we talked about the career path and the time and duration that a HiPo program should have, and that would be my last question. And how long an employee should be in that HiPo program in order to reach the next level or to climb the ladder, quote unquote, in the organization?
Minal, you want to take this?
Sure. Nisha, did you say how involved the employee should be?
No, it would be great if you can talk about that too. But I was asking that, my question was, the HiPo employees who are in that program have gone through that program. Now, what's the duration, the standard duration that you have seen that one employee has taken in order to reach to the next role or to the next leadership role within the organization?
Yeah, so one would safely say, between 2 to 3 years is what one would expect the person to take to move to the next level of role. and it is a long-term investment. When you're working on certain aspects of personality, certain skills, etc., it takes that much time for someone to move from current level to the next level.
All right. Well, Vishal and Milo, thank you so much for joining with us today. And it's been an interesting conversation. And you can see that on Twitter stream. And once you get time after the show, we would appreciate if you can go to our Twitter stream, hashtag IndiaHR Live, and pull up all those questions and answer to those questions personally. So that that will be a great learning session for our audience, apart from this show. So again, thank you so much from all of our India HR Live team and on behalf of all of our India HR Live team and from our audience for being there with us and sharing your valuable insights and experience on hypo initiatives at Wipro.
Thank you so much, Nisha.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. So to our audience, again, thank you so much for tuning in and making this show a successful one with all the interesting questions, and we really, really appreciate that. So we will see you all third Tuesday with an interesting panel. Until then, bye from your host, Misha.